Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you bake to the future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And today we have a special guest host with us, Kelly Knowles, who's ABA's Vice President of Political and State Affairs. And she's joined us before on the podcast to talk about state challenges during the coronavirus. And today she will be the host rather than the guest. And we'll be talking with Jesse Amoroso, Vice President of Amoroso's Baking Company. And she'll talk to him about what has been going on with Amoroso's during these challenging times and what it's like to be an emerging leader in the baking industry.
And it's great to have Kelly on the show because she's known Jesse for quite a while. And a little bit about Amoroso's is it's based in the Philadelphia area, and it's been a family-owned business for 5 generations. And they're known for their classic lines of Italian breads and rolls, thinking Philly cheesesteak or hoagies. And they also make muffins and danishes and donuts and pretzels and all those delicious things. And they serve the East Coast and nationwide for both food service and for retail. And so they have a pretty interesting perspective of what's going on since they're localized and nationwide with both fresh and frozen baked goods.
And we are excited to have Jesse with us today. He's worked at Amoroso's since 2010, working in various areas of the bakery, as well as in administration, sales, and marketing. And he currently oversees the company's business development. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks for having me.
And your last name is also Amoroso. So it's, I'm certain that you've been involved with the bakery more than since 2010.
Very true.
And before we hand over the mic to Kelly, Haley and I just have a few hardball questions. I'll take the first one. And what is your favorite baked good?
My favorite baked good. I think I would probably have to go with a delicious Philly-style hoagie roll.
You're not just saying that because you guys make them, right?
No, I've probably eaten more than my fair share. And so I think it's just, based on existing preference.
Very nice. Haley, you got the next question.
Yes. So we just want to know where you're joining us from, specific location-wise.
We're in closets, for example.
I actually am joining you from Belmar, New Jersey, from our facility.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And we're now going to pass it over to Kelly to take it away.
Thanks, Haley. Jesse, it's great to be with you today.
Glad to be here with you all.
Yeah, when you speak about your favorite baked good, I can't help but remember just, 6 to 9 months ago, I was in Washington, D.C. At an event, and I was talking to a guy who was in the security industry, and we happened to bring up Philadelphia, and he mentioned how much he loves Philly cheesesteaks and Amoroso's bread and serves it to his staff. And I texted you, and you sent him a great care package. So just a wonderful story. But that's a favorite baked good of a lot of folks, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania. So they're some of the best I've ever had.
We appreciate that. And as we like to say, if people can't make it to Philly, we'll bring Philly to them.
That's exactly right. Well, he was thrilled. So, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I have certainly loved getting to know you and your family while representing your company on behalf of ABA in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And, as Katie and Haley kind of briefly mentioned in the beginning, tell us a little bit about your background and how you made your way back to Amoroso's in 2010, leading up to the role that you have now.
Well, I think, as was, referenced at the beginning part, certainly it's been, in my blood, and I've been around it my whole life. That goes without saying. But, unlike some, it wasn't necessarily a dedicated, outcome or planned, future for me when I was younger. In fact, what I really appreciated was that my parents, afforded me a fabulous education in which I really had a great handle on a liberal arts approach, which gave me the ability to learn a lot of different things in a lot of different fields and ways of thinking. And actually, I majored in urban real estate and development while I was in undergrad. And from that point, I actually had taken a position in finance, and I worked in the investment banking world in New York City, and lived in New York City for 3 years before moving back to Philadelphia and joining the family to work in the business. And at that point, certainly it was from the ground up.
So you held a lot of different roles within, no pun intended, within the company. And the background that you had in New York City working in finance, even back to your major, which is, urban real estate and development, which I think would be applicable certainly to your role in helping Amoroso's grow and broaden their footprint. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how that background helped position you to be in the role that you're in today?
Definitely. One of the things that I think was really amazing about the opportunity in the financial world, specifically in investment banking, I worked at a firm that specialized in mergers and acquisitions in the consumer retail sector of the industry. And so what that really gave me was the benefit of understanding a lot of formal reasoning, really understanding the accounting and the financial metrics and mechanics behind how these businesses operate and run. But one of the things that I really thrive on is human interaction and problem solving. And that's one of the things that I didn't necessarily have as much academic experience in, because I think a lot of that is gained on the job and through experience rather than in a classroom or from a book. But certainly now that I've stepped into, a management role and I help, lead the company's day-to-day operations, having, somewhat of a financial background has definitely been a benefit in my abilities to, engage in certain conversations and decisions that are certainly more financially oriented. But it wasn't until, a good portion into my career with our family business that really became important, because, I did have to spend time wearing uniforms, handling different, responsibilities and jobs, whether it be delivering product on a truck, or, working at a mixer or at an oven or packaging line. So it was getting that real hands-on experience first that was critical in my father's eyes specifically. And now, though I might have complained about it then, now I realize the dividends that it certainly paid. In the way of just giving me a well-rounded approach. So I don't think it really came in until later.
Right. Well, I mean, the fact that you did so many of those jobs and roles at your company and able to understand what it really takes to pull a facility together and produce those delicious products. I know a lot of other companies implement those same strategies for their management folks, that they want them to have that experience, on the production floor and on the distribution routes. So that's great. Was there anything, of all those different roles and jobs that you did in preparing for this management role, any big takeaways that maybe you were surprised to learn?
The biggest takeaway was that my father wanted to see me make mistakes. And that was the biggest surprise for me as well. And the reason why was for the fact that he is a believer, and I am too, that the most important way that we can improve and that we can progress is to learn from the mistakes that we make. And I really credit him with giving me the foundation to do that, because in order to foster that, environment and that sort of understanding, you've got to give the folks in your organization the comfort to feel safe making, decisions, taking chances and taking risks without feeling that they're going to be punished. And though that we would have, recap meetings and discuss where I might have gone wrong or what I could have maybe decided to handle in a different or perhaps more beneficial way, it's really the conversation that ensues and the discussion around those mistakes in preparing myself and our team on how to prevent those same mistakes from being made in the future and learning from our past.
Well, that's right. And when you have an environment where folks feel like they're free to take risk and then make a mistake and it's okay and you can learn from it, that's just so valuable in today's work environment.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more.
Well, switching gears a little bit to the current challenging times this country is facing. And I remember back a couple of months ago, really, I guess it was mid-March, I got a call from you. I think that was about when it was. And you were concerned about your employees' safety and the challenge that with the pandemic, COVID-19 that had started, really protecting your employees as they tried to move to and from the bakery and the facility, and some were being pulled over due to curfews, and then some employees, I think I recall you saying, were just concerned about should they be out because of the curfews. And so we were able to kind of work that out together through some of ABA's resources. But it was it really was great to be able to connect with you during a time when your company needed our help. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of impact that COVID-19 has had on Amoroso's, over the last 3 months?
Definitely. And, I'd start by saying, Kelly, that what I'm going to share is probably not too different from most other members of ABA and other folks that are in food processing or manufacturing more broadly, which has been, it's created challenges that have been unforeseen. And, I've used this phrase before, but, I tend to use sports analogies. There's no playbook that we can pull off the shelf and read from. And, no matter how much experience someone in our organization might have and how many years experience they have spent specifically in this business, really there's been nothing like this for a century or so, as we all know. And, so those challenges are unprecedented. And I think that, where you started is most important, that as much as we feel, commitment and an obligation to keep our customers satisfied and filled with product, whether in the food service or the retail sector, it's equally, if not more, but it is more important to maintain the integrity with which we treat our employees with respect and care and concern. Because our employees are our lifeblood and we are nothing without our employees. So it is in our best interest. It's certainly in their best interest. And as a byproduct, it's also in our customers' best interest to make sure that we are keeping them safe and comfortable. Because among all the challenges, amid the fears of COVID-19, giving them confidence and letting them know that we really do prioritize their health and safety first is paramount for us to be able to operate anything else in our business. And so I think it's really affected us in the way that we manage our daily operations. We run each shift. It's affected the way in which our HR team has had to manage, communicate, and interact with current employees, prospective employees, folks that we are in the process of onboarding. It's affected training. It's affected the ability to just get the right amount of labor that I'm sure everyone is dealing with in the same manner that we are. Just knowing that it's an uphill battle. So I think, if anything, this has been a challenging time where what's been really, really great for us to see is how deep every single person, not only on our senior management team, but in our entire organization, has been digging to really go above and beyond the call of duty to do their part and pull their weight. So I think, there are few words to describe the global impact that this is having on everyone and the magnitude of it. But I think in so many ways, both from its effect on sales volume, our ability to maintain the right labor, and then also the added challenges of keeping people safe and protected.
Right. I mean, that's such great stuff. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned communication and maybe employee morale, but can you talk about how the pandemic has impacted, how you communicate with your employees? Can you give us some examples and extrapolate a little bit on that?
Definitely. I think if anything, it made us recognize the fact that we have to do a better job at communicating with our employees. That's not to say that our HR team and the related folks in our organization don't already take this, very seriously and have maintained, commitments in terms of the way that we communicate things. But I think in times like these, no news is not necessarily good news. No news is concerning. And so we'd rather not let fear build in folks' minds and let them know the things that we're trying to do in a proactive manner to give them the right, PPE, to give them the right feeling that we're going to, handle these situations in the right manner. And so I think, that's one of those main things that we've done, whether it's using our human resources information system to push out communication. That's always been a constant, but we have now turned more so to, direct letters written to employees and, using individually addressed envelopes so that they understand how seriously we're taking this and the care and concern that we're treating this with. And it's just giving them the comfort knowing that, we would treat them as we would treat our own family.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us who, particularly when we look at leadership development and employee retention, a lot of the feedback we get is that folks, they want to work at a place where they feel like their job makes a difference, and they're cared about where they work, and their employer has their best interest at heart. And that certainly sounds like that's what's happening at Amoroso's. So Jesse, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic that's happening right now, the nation's also experiencing some serious turmoil within the purview of race relations in this country, and specifically the Black Lives Matter movement. For you personally, what are your thoughts on the situation? But then also, how would you encourage the industry to respond?
Well, I think it's a very important point, Kelly, and I'm glad that you asked. As you said, 2020 has been challenging for all of us. Coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic have really created a tremendous set of challenges that are unforeseen. And certainly more recently, the murder of George Floyd has created great grief across the entire country, and a lot of long overdue and much needed awareness has ensued. And so I know that personally, myself and my family and our organization are all asking what we can do to help and how we can help. And it's true that we all come from different backgrounds, and we've all got different experiences and paths and perspectives. And it's those that we can all draw from to help make this a better situation. And it's about embracing those differences and about finding, healing through unity and equality for all. And I think that as leaders in the industry, we can hold ourselves and our organizations to the same expectations and standards that we're holding our public officials, elected officials, and other folks in our local and more broad communities across the country.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for sharing that. I know it came from the heart. In terms of your company, I know that you're associated or owned by 151 Foods as well. Can you help just explain a little bit about the different companies and how it makes up, the structure of your organization?
Certainly. So 151 Foods really is our main operating entity that really produces all the products for our brands and labels such as Amoroso's, Ginsberg, Bakery, and so forth. And really, that's more so our operating company. The Amoroso brand and label is certainly how we go to market, and really is treated more as the sales and marketing and distribution entity. And certainly that has been the brand name that has been known in the Philadelphia area, and now has traveled with the institution of the cheesesteak and the hoagie, so to speak. And so, 151 Foods really is the operating entity, whereas Amoroso's is the brand that we mainly trade under.
Great. That makes sense. The other thing I want to talk about today, just in terms of ABA and your role in the industry, and you've been back, really since 2010. That happened to be the same year my daughter was born. So that was a great year for me and a great year for the industry that you came back to the table. You've been a participant in Next Gen Baker, which is ABA's industry professional group for emerging leaders. Prior to my role in state affairs, I was staff liaison to that committee. And as you recall, we used to be called the Executive Leadership Development Committee, or ELDC. And to my good fortune, you were a Baker co-chair during part of my tenure in that. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your experience with ELDC, now known as Next Gen Baker, and how it's supported and your career as you've gotten back into the baking industry.
Definitely. And I also recall those days very fondly. I think that it was myself and Morgan that really, pushed not on, but with you, right. To work on that change from ELDC to Next Gen Baker to make it a little bit more easy to, reference. But, I think that was certainly paramount in my development, just from the networking opportunities that it afforded me. Really bringing it back to the last question that you asked, it's in conversations and networking opportunities that I learned things like really focusing on how we can show, not just talk about, our appreciation. And so going back to the last question, one of the things that we did at 151 Foods last week was we had a cookout as if it was an NFL tailgate for every single one of our employees and drivers and folks, whether office, administrative, operations, or otherwise, for about 15 hours to make sure we covered all day parts and all shifts to really give back to the community that's supporting us, which is our own people. And it's from networking opportunities through ELDC that we've been able to interface with some of the longtime leaders in the industry that have shared with us some of the benefits about really, working with your employees that truly have been gained by them over, a long period of, spent in the industry. And so for us, as young leaders, folks like myself to be able to benefit from that opportunity, I think is just, quite amazing. And so that's something that I definitely have taken away from Next Gen Baker. In addition to the fact that it just really gives young leaders the opportunity to really see the impact that ABA has in terms of all the issues that we talk about on a daily basis, but more specifically on the Hill.
Yeah, I think ABA best practices, that's one of the things that members say oftentimes. Engagement with the association is so valuable to learn best practices from other Baker and allied member companies. And of course, you mentioned Morgan. That's Morgan Murphy at Mother Murphy's Laboratories, who was your allied co-chair during your tenure as Baker co-chair of Next Gen Baker. And he's terrific. And you guys led a really great time of Next Gen Baker growth. We changed our name, I think, and kind of changed the program content for the better. And I think, you bring up such a great point. And I love how you mentioned the Hill. Let's talk about that for a minute. One of the key components of Next Gen Baker is taking participants up to Capitol Hill to meet with policymakers to talk about the issues that really impact bakers and their day-to-day business operations. You participated several times in those, what we call, fly-in industry lobbying meetings on the Hill with members of Congress. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like for you.
Well, and if I'm being totally honest, it was more of a train in for me, being that I'm in Philadelphia. I didn't quite have to fly. I think I might have actually driven one year, but those were just eye-opening experiences. And, to see the way that we were able to communicate issues that were affecting our business and businesses like ours in the industry, whether in South Jersey or in Pennsylvania, when we were in Philadelphia, I think, to have that experience as a young leader in the industry and to see that we do really have a voice and to understand why then it is so important to continue supporting ABA and understand the way that ABA in turn supports us as members, I think that was really eye-opening. And then also just as a young professional to be given that opportunity to interact with our elected officials and the policy and decision makers. I think that's just an opportunity that is so important for our everyday leadership and decision making and what we do.
Yeah, I think the great work that ABA does on the Hill under the leadership of our CEO, Rob Mackey, to Lee Sanders, who runs our federal affairs program. The ABA staff can go up and meet on your behalf and do a great job in the great work that they do. But having members of the industry come to town and meet personally with members of Congress and their staff really, brings a whole new level of advocacy to the program. So we're lucky that we have such great engagement from ABA members like you when we take our messages up on the Hill. One of the things that Next Gen Baker also focuses on is, obviously leadership development. And there's a series that includes hearing from leaders, various leaders in the industry, and kind of the CEO series, so to speak. And during my tenure, I asked your dad, Lynn Amoroso, to come and be a speaker at one of our forums and talk about, what keeps him up at night. And it was a great, highly rated session, maybe one of the best ever. And I remember vividly what he talked about, which was the weather, which I thought was so interesting. That was probably, maybe 13 years ago, talking about, how the weather impacted the distribution routes in a way that folks really had not thought about on a day-to-day basis, and what it meant to actually get the product from the facility, to the shelf and to the restaurants. And so that was really, educational and eye-opening for me. But for you and your role, what keeps you up at night, Jesse? What keeps you up at night these days?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I would have to say what keeps me up at night is the next day right now. What keeps me up at night is really not knowing even what to expect within the next 12 to 24 hours. And I think that given everything that is going on in the world right now, this might be the most true, this might be the time that speaks most truly to that. Just because we truly have not been able to predict what's going to happen each day for the past several months. And so, that's what I think I would tell you keeps me up at night.
Well, that's certainly understandable. I mean, so given that and knowing that, what happens day to day, you never know what it's going to bring. How do you stay nimble and in such an environment of uncertainty? I mean, how do you do that?
One of the things that I've really tried to been focused on in my personal development is focusing on teamwork and a team mentality in the way that we approach things. And my father and I have talked about it quite often over the past 2 months. But I can't even count how many times in a positive way we have mentioned that we are so proud of our team. Like I said earlier, not just senior leadership, but everyone involved and the way that everyone is really digging deep. And I think that gives us confidence knowing that there is, cautious optimism that we can continue to muster through these challenges, knowing that we're not going the road alone. And I truly believe that, not to say it in a prophetic way, but more so to just say that what we've learned is that by empowering our team, they've now taken more ownership and they're now sharing, the shouldering of the burden and, really, pitching in to do their part to get us through this. And that is what I think, helps keep us nimble. That's what helps keep us grounded and centered as much as possible.
That's great. It sounds like morale is strong despite, the really challenging times that the country is going through. That's a credit to the environment and the work environment that you've created at your company. And the outlook, I think one of the things that the pandemic has brought, so to speak, is a renewed, folks have seemed to fall in love, at least on the retail side, with bread again. I know a lot of our partners in food service, our members have had very, hard times over the last 3 months, given the restrictions on restaurants and the impact of the pandemic. But on the retail side, it's a little bit of a different story. But, in terms of looking at the category and the baking industry overall, how do you feel about the future of baking as we move forward, out of these challenging times in a more broad way?
Once again, that changes, I think, on a daily basis, Kelly. And the reason I say that is because the more conversations that our HR and operations team has in terms of, how we're going to work on, getting the right, operating plan in place, given all the challenges that we're facing. And similarly, the same conversations that many of our sales folks are having in trying to navigate the understandings of how the bakery departments in retail supermarkets will offer products. Previously, as in many areas, in our greater Philadelphia area, there has been a lot of what we call the loose roll category. But that loose roll category, though serviced with acrylic bins and tongues and plastic bags, I think will probably be quite different as we all, have known it thus far. And so I think it's our ability to be able to work with our research and development teams and the folks in our organizations that can help us think alternatively and differently on ways that we can grow and change. And I think the best thing that we can do right now is put ourselves in a position where we can be somewhat flexible to the demands and the needs of our customer.
That's great, Jesse. This is Katie again. I have so many questions now, but both between what Kelly was talking about with, political engagement and how that might be changing. You were talking about going up on the Hill, and the concept of a fly-in is very precarious right now, given the coronavirus. We could talk about that. We could talk about, just your workforce and everything. But just so I can get a little bit of perspective, how many facilities and how many employees do you guys have?
So right now we've pretty much downsized to one facility where we've got, where our needs right now are hovering somewhere, around 600 heads right now.
And has that changed during this crisis?
Yeah, that number definitely has flexed both up and down, depending on where things are. Certainly, there was a major contraction that we saw, probably with the second to third week in March for a solid, month and a half or so beyond that. And I think what some folks are starting to see is, especially in the food service side of things, some of the, stay at home and shelter in place ordinances and requirements have been raised and loosened. And so people are somewhat, seeing a little bit more activity from the sales side. And so the need to quickly, mount our troops, so to speak, and really, get folks in line to, help us produce higher volume. That seems to be a challenge given, fears of coronavirus. And the other thing right now is while we understand that in many cases it's necessary for folks in certain areas, some of the government stimulus actually has placed challenges, I should say, on employers such as our company, knowing that there are challenges in sort of getting parity with certain levels of where people might be able to be financially at the moment.
I think that could be a whole podcast unto its own. So, Jesse, earlier you talked about how your employees were really digging deep, especially as we were early on in this crisis. Do you have, and I'm putting you on the spot here, do you have any stories that specifically can help illustrate that?
I think one of the best examples is that a lot of folks who have family commitments and otherwise have been willing to change a lot of their scheduling requirements based on the changes that we've asked some folks to be accommodating for, given the fact that volume has changed, at different times throughout this whole pandemic, and knowing that our business can't just run according to, placing product into a freezer. We've got a large fresh component to our business. And so we are beholden to the fact that we've got to make sure our trucks get out onto the street early enough so that our customers can receive our products. So in many cases, in order to do that, we've had folks from general helper categories up to management and supervision that have been willing to make those changes and accommodations really for the greater good of our team.
Yeah, Jesse, it sounds like this is Kelly, that, your teamwork and what you've worked so hard to create that terrific environment at Amoroso's, the team is nimble. And in a time like this, when you have such a well-oiled machine and the folks who work for you working towards the common goal, really, really helps bring it home for the company.
Definitely. And I appreciate, that acknowledgement, but I think that rings true, not because of anything that I myself am specifically doing, but once again, on behalf of our team and the way that they lead by example.
It's Haley popping in again. And I was just wondering if you have any last thoughts that you would like to share with our audience, any words of advice for other leaders in the baking industry going forward?
I mean, for me right now, I'm trying to be as much of a sponge as possible. I'm trying to lean on and lean into as much experience that I can, get access to right now. Trying to have as many conversations as possible. And we're really trying to have as many open conversations with all folks in our organization to really improve what we're doing. It's often true that the folks doing the actual work, every day, day in, day out, are the ones who truly know the changes that need to be made and can make the right recommendations. And so we're really trying to, have open conversations, whether it's about work or other things, and, just make sure that we keep communicating.
And communication is absolutely key. Let's close it on out. Thank you so much, Kelly, for being our special guest host, and Jesse for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
And for our audience, I want to let you know that if you enjoyed this podcast, we have many other episodes on the baking industry and the impact of the coronavirus. Please go to baketothefuture.org to find more episodes, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.